In my experience, in my bubble of social media and my fan base, I'm looked at oftentimes as like this example of like what a man can be, or like how a woman should be treated by a man, or the way that I talk about my wife, or how present I am as a father, and all of the things that social media can paint. And yet, there are times when I will say something to my wife because I'm in my wound that, like, if there was a camera on, I would lose all my followers. I'd be canceled in a heartbeat.
Hey friends, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Now that my own subpoena situation has settled down a bit, I want to share something that's been sitting in my inbox for a while. I received this tip a few months ago, right before Justin Baldoni's lawsuit was thrown out. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with the information. I kept it to myself, thinking they would appeal the case because there seemed to be a lot of solid evidence. I genuinely believed Justin's side had strong proof, especially showing how Leslie Sloan, Blake Lively's publicist, had been talking to media outlets. According to the tip, she was giving out specific details meant to change how people saw Blake and control the story. But not everything she said made it into the public news. When I first read through the details, I couldn't believe it. What she told the media was so revealing that it completely contradicted Blake's public claims. Honestly, it felt like the missing piece that could have changed everything in the case. I didn't share this right away because I wanted to confirm things and speak with a couple of trusted sources. These are people who've given me solid information before and would stay anonymous no matter what. Even if Blake's legal team ever tried to demand my records or sources, I would never give them up. In August 2024, after Blake faced backlash from the movie's premiere, things exploded. People weren't just upset about the film itself, but also about how she promoted it and how she acted in interviews. Many viewers and insiders thought her behavior didn't align with the sensitive topic the movie dealt with: abuse. Knowing what's happening now with how she's treating content creators like myself, it's clear that she will do whatever she can to twist the story and make herself look better, even if it hurts others. Now, here's the core of what I was told. This information isn't just about Blake, it also includes how people felt about Justin's leadership on set. According to this tip, Blake and Colleen, the woman whose mother's story the film is based on, worked tirelessly on the project. The film's topic was deeply personal to Colleen, involving abuse. And then the story was spun to criticize Justin, saying that, as a man, he shouldn't be controlling how a woman's painful story is told. The messaging from Blake's side tried to paint Justin as someone trying to dominate the narrative about female trauma. The implication was that no man should lead or direct such a sensitive story unless women are also in full control behind the scenes. This narrative was used to suggest that Justin's role as a male director was somehow inappropriate for a story about women's experiences with abuse. So, seems there was a push to shift blame and take control of the public. It's message making. It seemed like Justin was in the wrong simply for being the director. It's just another example of how the truth can be manipulated behind the scenes. So, here's what I've learned from a tip that came in, and I've been sitting on this for quite a while, unsure whether to share it. Apparently, Blake Lively was telling people that Justin Baldoni directing a movie about abuse was no different than the government trying to control women's reproductive rights. In her view, a man leading such a film was the same as stripping women of the right to choose, like with abortion laws. Honestly, that comparison is extreme and doesn't actually relate to the topic of sexual harassment. It was more about pushing a narrative than making a solid argument. The film includes scenes involving intimacy. According to what I've been told, Blake was reportedly spreading the idea that it's inappropriate for a man to direct a movie where a woman performs in sexual scenes, lest that woman has full creative control. She tried to suggest that because Justin was a man, he shouldn't be directing these moments. But this logic seems flawed, especially since her husband, Ryan Reynolds, was heavily involved in Deadpool, which contains very graphic scenes. If it's fine for Ryan, why not for Justin? It appears the issue was never about gender alone, but who she preferred to be in charge, from what I can tell. The real motivation was control over the sequel. It seems Blake wanted to position herself as the one to take over, not just as an actress, but creatively behind the scenes. So instead of saying Justin did something actually wrong, she allegedly planted the idea that he shouldn't be leading a story about women's trauma simply because he's a man. That's not the same thing as misconduct. It's a tactic to push someone out by making them seem like the wrong fit for the story. There were claims that Justin tried to take over the project completely, rewriting parts of the script and insisting things go his way. Blake reportedly justified changes by saying they were done under Colleen Hoover's instructions. But in truth, they were changes she wanted, not Colleen. She painted herself as the true creative leader while making Justin seem uninterested and difficult to work with. When the film was being promoted, Blake and other cast members were everywhere. Justin was noticeably absent, and instead of explaining that he was pushed out, the story became that he just didn't care or wasn't doing his part. Blake wanted to be seen as the one who carried the entire project. She even made sure people knew Ryan wasn't involved to distance him from any possible criticism. The bigger picture here is that it was never really about safety or inappropriate behavior. It was about shaping the public story in a way that removed Justin from the spotlight and made Blake the central force. She used politically sensitive comparisons and emotional arguments to turn people against him, not because of what he did, but because of who he was. The idea that a man directing a film about abuse is somehow similar to taking away a woman's right to make personal choices, like abortion, just doesn't make sense. It's not logical. Feels like a forced comparison. What it really seems like is an attempt to push the idea that men shouldn't be allowed to direct stories about women. That's one perspective. But let's be honest, it sounds like she's trying to position herself as the only one fit to direct that kind of story. She's trying to send a message. Men shouldn't be behind the camera when it comes to stories about women's struggles. And in doing that, she's putting herself in the spotlight as the right person to lead such projects. It seems like she's saying, only I can tell this story properly, even though she hasn't directly said that. But if the working environment on that set was really as bad as she's suggesting, full of mistreatment or inappropriate behavior, then why is the biggest issue simply that a male director was chosen? Directors are hired to do their jobs, to guide the actors and bring a vision to life. That's normal in filmmaking. They're not supposed to hand the project over to the actors. If things were truly as toxic as she claims, we'd be hearing more serious complaints. Not just that she didn't want him in charge. This situation has always seemed more about her wanting control over the movie and its sequel, not about any real harm or inappropriate conduct. She's hinted at serious claims, like scenes being filmed without her approval. But she hasn't actually made those statements directly. Instead, she drops subtle suggestions to make people question what really happened without clearly saying. The way she's framed everything gives the impression that no man should be allowed to tell a woman's story, that only a female filmmaker can do it justice. But that's not how it's worked in the past. Plenty of male directors have made powerful films about women. Directors like Woody Allen or John Hughes, for example. That doesn't mean female directors can't do it too. There are many talented women in the industry. But in this case, it seems like her issue isn't really with men making women's films. It's with this particular man standing in the way of her goal. Even Justin made a strange comment on the red carpet. When asked about continuing with the sequel, he said it felt like Blake wanted the job herself. That says a lot about the situation. If there were truly harmful things happening behind the scenes, this wouldn't be just about who gets to direct. And as for Colleen, the author of the original book, she didn't demand anything unusual. There weren't fights or drama between her and the director. She was deeply involved from the very beginning. She was featured in the film promotions more than most authors usually are. Okay. That shows the production team respected her role and included her heavily throughout. They gave her something she didn't even have to ask for. They allowed her to be involved, to share her perspective, and to have a say throughout the entire process. She was included from beginning to end. What really upsets me is that I've known the truth for a long time, but I stayed quiet. Now, as I'm being pulled into legal matters, and knowing she's spreading lies about me so openly, I just can't stay silent anymore. If someone is willing to lie that boldly, then it's hard to trust anything they say. She went to the media with a very calculated plan. Her team told reporters that the problems had nothing to do with her, but then they tried to twist the story, saying Justin was lazy, uncooperative, and difficult on set. That's exactly the image she wanted to push. The truth is, she made threats to damage his reputation and followed through on them. Her goal was to paint him as someone who didn't care and wasn't doing his part, all while making herself look like the only one putting in real effort. I've thought a lot about this whole situation. Honestly, if Blake really wanted to make a movie, she could have just bought the rights to another book. There are so many authors, including Colleen Hoover, with stories still available for adaptation. But instead of starting something new, she chose to take over a project someone else had already been working on. That's not ambition, that's cutting corners. And I don't even think she or her team has the insight or awareness to recognize what's truly relevant to audiences today. Her main concern always seems to be herself. Justin didn't originally plan on getting involved in something so big. The book only became widely known later, but once it did, it turned into a major success. I believe Blake couldn't stand that. He had a story she wanted to tell, and she thought she'd be the better person to do it. Ryan supported her in this idea, came up with all kinds of stories, telling one version to friends, another to the public. Some were told that Justin was dangerous, while others were told he simply didn't care. They kept repeating that Blake worked harder than anyone else and gave everything to the film, while Justin was cold and caused trouble. If you keep repeating those things long enough, people start believing it. That's why some still accuse others of smearing her name when in reality, she's the one who has spread negative stories not only about Justin, but about other people, including media figures and creators. She knows how to play on sympathy and use being a woman as a way to gain support. Sometimes I catch myself almost feeling bad for her until I remember how calculated her behavior is. I kept quiet, hoping this would come out in court. Maybe it still will, but this moment, seeing how everything unfolded, is when I knew the stories about Justin were false. I'm not here defending him blindly. I didn't even know who he was. I just believe in fairness. It could be anyone. It's about what's right. I support truth, not sides.